So it looks like yesterday's video blog has stirred up a little bit of controversy, and I can understand why. I certainly did not intend that to be a full explanation of the importance of grammar, but rather as a dramatic example of the ambiguity that can result if you don't understand a principle of grammar. So in a sense, yes, that example was unique. It's not often that lack of knowledge of a rule of grammar will lead to a sentence that's so ambiguous and so confusing as the one I discussed yesterday. But in another sense, it's not unique at all, because the goal of grammar is to help make our communication, our expression, completely, fluidly clear, for there to be no barriers to understanding of what we're saying. And so all of the rules of grammar contribute to that end. They don't all help us to avoid unresolvable ambiguities. They help us to avoid any barriers to communication. So that was a dramatic example, but the rules of grammar help us deal with examples that are not so dramatic. So there are a few concepts of grammar that I find myself encountering on a regular basis, and that really, if they're not understood, will lead to barriers to communication. Here's one: the misplaced modifier. Familiar with this concept? Mrs. Davenport discusses it in Rex Sparks, and here's a funny example she gives. In the sentence, running down the street, his shoelaces became untied. Now, for a moment, did you imagine shoelaces running down the street? I do when I hear that sentence, because the modifier at the beginning is supposed to modify the first word of the independent clause, of the clause that follows. So it sounds like his shoelaces were running down the street. Well, if you understand the concept of a misplaced modifier, you know how to avoid that confusion. Another is the concept of the amphibole, with a Y, amphibole. Amphibole is a sentence that can be legitimately grammatically interpreted in two ways. I encountered this just yesterday in the car with my daughter. She came out of her piano lesson and she said, "Sorry, I was late." And my answer to her was, "I know." And then I thought about it for a minute and I thought, wait, she wasn't telling me she was late. She was apologizing for being late. So my response made no sense whatsoever, and I just laughed and said, "Oh, that was an amphibole. I wasn't sure if you meant sorry, comma, I was late, or sorry that I was late." So she clarified that she meant I'm sorry that I was late. Okay, so that formulation does not admit of amphibole. There's no longer that ambiguity. She knows that concept. I can express that to her, and she knows exactly what I mean. Concepts of style, grammatical style, such as the issue of parallelism, I find it extremely useful in my writing. Parallelism, which is the making of component parts of a sentence grammatically similar, really contributes to a fluidity of expression that makes it easier for the reader to take in. So all of these are examples that don't lead to the incredible ambiguities that the elliptical clause did that I discussed yesterday, but nevertheless they're very important for contributing to fully clear, effortless communication. So one last point I want to make. A lot of what I teach in my grammar classes is a vocabulary for discussing grammar. It's understanding the concepts within grammar. What is an adjective? What is a noun? All of the parts of speech. What are clauses? What are phrases? What are sentence fragments? What are run-on sentences? And this vocabulary enables me to have a dialogue with my students when I'm discussing their writing. So for example, if I tell them, you could use a stronger verb here, they don't know what a verb is, I can't make that statement to them, and I can't help them to improve their writing. So a lot of knowledge of grammar is just learning the tools that enable you to communicate about the component parts of writing in order to improve the clarity of your expression in writing. So this, I hope, fleshes out a little bit more why I regard grammar as so crucially important.